I want you to take a second and think about, well, exactly what you were doing right now today.
Or maybe think about who you are being today.
Yeah, exactly. Because chances are you aren't just one thing. You are juggling multiple roles.
Oh, constantly.
Right. I mean, just in the span of a single morning, you might be an employee handling a massive project, a parent frantically making sure lunches are packed, maybe a friend answering an urgent text message.
Don't forget being a team leader trying to keep morale high.
Yes, or even a community volunteer organizing a weekend event. It is a completely chaotic reality. And it's funny, we often carry so much guilt when our lives blur together like that.
We really do.
So if you are feeling a little overwhelmed by all those hats you wear, well, you are definitely not alone.
It really is sort of the defining feature of the modern day. I mean, we are
Okay.
constantly switching gears, shifting from one identity to another, sometimes minute by minute.
Yeah.
And for decades, the conventional wisdom, the advice we've all been handed down, has been that this juggling act is inherently draining. We have been told to strictly separate our work life from our personal life, to build these massive, impenetrable walls between our roles just to protect our sanity.
Right, the whole leave your personal life at the door mentality.
Exactly.
But what if that conventional wisdom is completely backwards? What if all that juggling, all that blurring of the lines, isn't actually draining you at all?
That's the million-dollar question.
But if holding multiple roles is secretly your greatest superpower? That is the mission of our deep dive today. We are looking at a truly fascinating March 2026 study. It was published in Occupational Health Science by a team of researchers, Periono, Van de Breek, de Bloom, and de Vries.
An incredible team.
Yeah, and we are going to find out if the absolute chaos of your daily schedule is actually making you stronger, smarter, and more effective.
And we're going to do that by exploring a completely new concept these researchers introduced. It's called role occurrence proximity.
Which sounds a bit academic.
It does sound like an academic term, yeah. But it essentially means performing different roles very closely together in time, blurring the boundaries, whether you are doing it on a purpose or by accident. And their findings about what happens to the human brain when we do this completely flip traditional advice about work-life separation on its head.
It really does.
It is a massive paradigm shift in how we think about human energy, attention, and productivity.
Okay, let's unpack this by setting a baseline, because when we talk about roles in the context of this specific study, we are talking about something very specific.
Right.
The researchers define a role as a position within a social group that carries behavioral expectations. It is almost like a script you are handed.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, like if your role is student, the script says you attend class, do your homework, and listen to the teacher. If your role is manager, the script says you delegate tasks, resolve conflicts, report to the executive.
Exactly. And it is vital to distinguish a role from a mere activity. The researchers were very careful about this.
Okay, how so?
Well, going for a jog in the morning, that is an activity.
Yeah.
But being the treasurer of your local running club, that is a role. It comes with social ties, obligations, and expectations from other people.
That makes total sense. But what really blew my mind reading through the background of this study was the sheer volume of roles the average person holds. The data shows that workers average about 3 distinct roles just at their workplace alone.
Which at work, yeah.
You might be a supervisor on one project, a subordinate on another, and an unofficial mentor to a new hire. And across all life domains, people juggle anywhere from 4 to 8 distinct roles.
That is a tremendous amount of cognitive switching. And historically, psychology and sociology have looked at this mental gymnastics routine through 2 very different, fiercely competing lenses.
The 2 big theories.
Right. The first is the pessimistic view, which dates all the way back to a sociologist named Good in 1960. This is known as the role strain perspective. The foundational assumption here is that human resources, your time, your physical energy, your attention span, are scarce. They are limited commodities, kind of like a pie. So if you have multiple roles, those roles are inevitably going to fight over your limited slices of pie. They will interfere with each other.
Right, because you only have 24 hours in a day and only so much brain power before you crash. So the scarcity leads to what the researchers call role conflict and role ambiguity.
Exactly.
Let's make that real for a second. Role conflict is when you are quite literally pulled in different directions by clashing demands, right? Like your boss desperately needs you to stay late to fix a client presentation, but your child has their school play at the exact same time.
That is the textbook definition. The expectations of the employee role and the parent role are fundamentally incompatible in that specific physical moment. You have to negotiate internally, and usually someone is going to be let down, which generates immense stress.
Yeah, that's rough.
And then, on the other side of that coin, you have role ambiguity, which is a lack of clarity. When you are switching hats so frequently, answering a work email, then dealing with a toddler's meltdown, then hopping back on a Zoom call, the expectations can become incredibly blurred.
You just lose track.
You temporarily lose track of what is actually required of you or which script you're supposed to be reading from. The role strain perspective argues that having more roles automatically increases both this conflict and this ambiguity, leading straight to burnout.
It sounds so intuitive, too. I mean, I'm sure you, listening to this right now, can easily recall a day where you felt that exact strain feeling, like you were stretched way too thin and there just wasn't enough of you to go around.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is a totally different way to look at this. Let's pivot to the optimistic view, which was proposed by Sieber in 1974. This is the role gain perspective. What if having multiple roles is actually an incredible advantage?
This is where the narrative shifts entirely. The role gain perspective argues that occupying multiple roles provides accumulated benefits. Instead of draining your pie, these roles offer a diverse, expanding portfolio of resources, privileges, and opportunities.
Okay, so it builds you up.
Think of it as diversifying your financial investments, but for your psychological well-being. If you only have one single role, say, your identity is entirely wrapped up in being an employee, and you have a terrible, no-good day at work,
Your whole world crashes.
your entire sense of self takes a massive hit. You have no buffer. But if you occupy several roles, a failure or a setback in one area can be offset by success or stability in another. If work is incredibly stressful, returning home to a thriving parent or community leader role acts as an emotional shock absorber against that stress.
It is like having an emotional safety net. If one tightrope snaps, you have three others catching you. And this leads to two specific positive outcomes that the study measured, which are role enrichment and role efficacy.
Yes. Role enrichment is the actual, tangible transfer of resources across your roles. The skills, the perspectives, the positive emotions you build in one role spill over and organically enhance your performance in another.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. Think about the intense patience and conflict resolution skills you develop while raising a teenager.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Those skills might suddenly make you a much better, more empathetic manager when dealing with a difficult team member at the office.
That is a great point.
And role efficacy is your perceived ability to successfully manage and distribute those resources. It is that feeling of competence. It's the deep-seated confidence that you can juggle these varied demands and use what you learn in one area of your life to succeed in a totally different one.
Okay, so we have these two massive colliding theories that have been duking it out for decades. Role strain says you are depleting scarce resources and burning out, and role gain says you are accumulating expandable resources and leveling up. So how did this specific 2026 study figure out which one is actually right? Because historically, researchers treated these two perspectives as an either-or situation.
And there's exactly what makes this paper so groundbreaking. The team led by Periono proposed a dual-path model. They argued that holding more roles could simultaneously lead to greater benefits and greater interferences. It doesn't have to be just one or the other.
Right.
But more importantly, they wanted to identify the trigger. What is the specific environmental condition that amplifies the gain or amplifies the strain?
Right, because previous studies mostly focused on people's preferences, like asking people on a scale of 1 to 10, do you prefer to keep your work and home life separate?
Exactly, which is just subjective feeling.
But this study didn't care about what you want to do. It looked at actual behavioral role integration. What are you physically doing in practice?
What's fascinating here is the introduction of this new metric, role occurrence proximity. It measures the degree to which your multiple roles occur and overlap within short time frames. To really understand this, the researchers use a brilliant visual metaphor. They describe time as a container.
Oh, I love this metaphor. Let's really paint a picture of this for the listener.
Imagine a specific 3-hour block of your day, say 6:0000 p.m. to 9:00 p.m. as a physical glass jar. Role occurrence proximity is about looking inside that jar to see how many different roles are interacting, bumping into each other, and sharing that exact same temporal space.
Okay.
If you are strictly separating your life, your work jar only has employee rocks in it, and your evening jar only has parent rocks in it. But for most of us, those jars are completely mixed.
Yes. Concrete examples make this so relatable. It is the working parent who is sitting on the couch at 8 p.m., technically inhabiting the parent or spouse role, but they are pulling out their laptop to reply to a non-urgent work email. Or it is the remote worker who is sitting in a Tuesday morning Zoom meeting for Project A, but secretly multitasking, texting their contractor about a kitchen remodel, and scheduling a dentist appointment for their kid. The roles are happening in incredibly close proximity. They are rattling around in the same time container.
Precisely. Now, to actually measure this in a scientifically rigorous way, the researchers had to get incredibly detailed. They couldn't just hand out a simple questionnaire.
I was looking at how they actually proved this, and their setup was wild. They didn't just ask people if they felt stressed out. They essentially asked people to treat their day like a pie chart, right? How did that methodology actually work?
They conducted a two-wave time-lagged survey with 202 working professionals, and they used what's called a modified day reconstruction method.
Which sounds super intense.
It is very thorough. To put it simply, they had participants slice their typical workday into roughly 3-hour chunks. Think 6:00 a.m. to 9:00 a.m., 9:00 to noon, noon to 3:00 p.m., and so on. For every single one of those slices, the participant had to label exactly which hats they were wearing.
So instead of dealing with abstract feelings about the whole day, they mapped out the day chronologically.
Exactly. By mapping the day this way, the researchers could literally mathematically track the overlap. If you reported acting as a manager, a mentor, and a parent, all between the hours of 1:00 p.m. and 4:00 p.m., you received a high proximity score for that container.
And just as a quick, slightly terrifying fun fact that came out of this meticulous mapping, the average participant in this study held exactly 6.28 distinct roles.
That's a huge number.
It is. So if you ever feel absurdly busy, the math proves you aren't crazy. You are literally living over 6 different lives at once.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the results. The researchers had their dual path model. They hypothesized that having a high number of roles would lead to more role strain, that conflict and ambiguity, and more role gain, the enrichment and efficacy.
Right, both going up together.
Yes, and they logically assumed that putting these roles in the same time container, having high role occurrence proximity, would amplify both paths equally. It would make the conflict much worse and the enrichment much better.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The results came in. And did more roles equal more strain? Did mashing these 6 different lives together in a 3-hour window cause people to completely break down from the stress?
The answer was no. Absolutely not.
Wow.
The hypothesis that a higher number of roles leads to role conflict and role ambiguity was completely unsupported by the data.
That is just wild to me.
It is a stunning result because it challenges half a century of occupational health assumptions. What they actually found was a massive, undeniable win for the role gain perspective. The raw number of roles a person holds is positively related to role enrichment and role efficacy.
So more is actually better.
The more hats you wear, the more internal resources and competence you feel. But the crucial finding, the true breakthrough of this paper, is that this benefit is profoundly amplified when role occurrence proximity is high.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me there is absolutely zero downside? I find it hard to believe that juggling 6 roles at once, constantly switching between a spreadsheet and a screaming toddler, doesn't cause at least a minor breakdown.
This raises an important question about how we view human capacity.
Yeah.
The researchers point out that the lack of chronic drain forces us to rethink that scarce resources assumption from the 1960s. What if our energy and attention aren't like a smartphone battery that just drains until it's dead?
Right.
What if they're expandable? Furthermore, the researchers suggest a concept called positive net gratification.
Okay, what does positive net gratification actually look like in a normal day?
Think of it like this. Let's say you are working from home, wrestling with a deeply frustrating spreadsheet. You take a 10-minute break to help your teenager with a quick homework problem. That is a role switch. It requires effort. It might even cause a momentary blip of stress to change gears.
Sure.
But you help them, they smile, and you share a nice moment.
Yeah.
That interaction gives you a massive, immediate dopamine hit. Because the roles are occurring in close proximity, in the same time container, you take that sudden burst of good energy, that positive affect, and you immediately apply it to the spreadsheet when you sit back down 5 minutes later.
Oh, I see. So it's not that there is zero friction when you switch gears. It's that the reward is so much higher than the friction.
Precisely. It is highly possible that the negative effects, the stress of switching, the occasional mixed-up priority do exist, but the positive benefits, The mood boosts, the transferred skills, the sense of accomplishment are so powerful that they simply override the negative effects.
That is a great way to put it.
It is like making a financial trade where you pay a $10 transaction fee but make $100 in profit. You don't really care about the fee because the net gain is so overwhelmingly positive.
That makes so much sense. You don't have to wait until 5 p.m. to feel the benefits of your home life. You are injecting those benefits directly into your workday right when you need them. But there has to be a catch, right?
There is a catch, and we have to look closely at the supplementary data to find it. Strain isn't completely dead. It isn't a constant chronic condition that ruins your whole day, but it is episodic. The time block data revealed exactly when the strain rears its ugly head.
Yes, this part was fascinating.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of a typical daily routine, the data showed that role ambiguity specifically spiked during two very narrow windows. The late morning, approximately 9:00 a.m. to 12:00 p.m., and the late afternoon, approximately 3:00 p.m. to 6:00 p.m.
Okay.
But crucially, it only spiked when roles from different domains, specifically work and non-work roles, overlapped in those specific windows.
The transition zones, the friction points of the day.
Exactly. Think about what happens between 9 a.m. and noon. You're navigating the morning rush, commuting, dropping kids off at school, frantically shifting into employee mode, and diving into the first meetings of the day. And then between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., you are winding down, leaving the office, dealing with rush hour traffic, and transitioning back to your home life.
Yeah, those times are always the most chaotic.
When you force a high degree of role overlap during those specific transitional time blocks, the cognitive load becomes confusing. The script is flipping too fast, the container is shaking too violently, and the expectations become ambiguous. But outside of those specific episodic windows, during the bulk of the day and evening, the overlapping of roles was largely beneficial.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening right now, trying to manage your own 6.28 roles without losing your mind? How do we take this academic concept of role occurrence proximity and actually use it? Let's talk practical takeaways, starting with the workplace.
For employers, this study is a massive wake-up call. The era of demanding rigid separation, this antiquated idea that an employee must check their personal life at the door and be 100% focused on corporate tasks for 8 hours straight, is not just outdated, it is actively hindering employee well-being and efficacy.
Wow.
Companies should actually stop demanding that separation. In fact, the supplementary findings showed that non-work roles are heavily associated with greater well-being. Employers should be actively nudging their employees to take on outside roles, encourage them to volunteer or support their community leadership positions.
In theory, that sounds great, but let me play devil's advocate for a second. Realistically, won't managers just see an employee checking out early to volunteer or answering a personal text at their desk as a drop in productivity? Won't they just see distraction?
That is the traditional fear, but the data proves it is unfounded. When an employee has those diverse roles and is allowed to integrate them, they bring enhanced problem solving, better emotional regulation, and higher overall efficacy back to their desk.
They are more resilient.
Yes.
Yes.
The manager isn't losing productivity, they are gaining a more capable, enriched worker.
And for you, the listener, my biggest takeaway is this. We have to let go of the guilt. It's funny, we carry so much shame when our lives blur together. If I'm at the office and I spend 5 minutes taking a quick personal call to handle a family matter or I text a friend back, I usually feel like I'm being a bad employee.
But the science says the exact opposite. Switching between role tasks in short time windows isn't a harmful distraction. It is a behavioral strategy to capitalize on overlapping resources.
That is such a cool way to think about it.
When you make that personal call, you are engaging a different part of your identity, a different skill set, and tapping into a different emotional well. When you hang up and return to your spreadsheet, you are bringing the residual energy of that non-work role with you. It builds your role efficacy.
It is a total reframe. You aren't stealing time from your employer. You are cross-training your brain. You are allowing the diverse parts of your life to enrich each other in real time.
And this applies to how we structure our days at home, too. While we want to be mindful of those transitional windows, meaning maybe don't schedule a highly complex family logistics call right at 9:00 a.m. when you are trying to orient yourself to the workday.
Right, save that for noon.
Exactly. During the bulk of the day, embracing the blur is advantageous. If you're working from home, throwing a load of laundry in while listening to a routine meeting isn't a failure of focus. It's a successful integration of your home manager role and your employee role. It creates a rhythm of small victories that accumulate.
This has been such a deeply validating deep dive. To summarize the main takeaway from all of this research, you aren't doing it wrong if your roles are bleeding into one another. We have been sold a myth of perfect work-life balance through strict, impenetrable separation. But Periano and the team have shown us that juggling multiple roles in close proximity is actually fostering enrichment and efficacy. You are expanding your resources, not depleting them.
It truly is a liberating perspective on how we manage our cognitive load. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought that bridges from this idea of cognitive load into the future of work.
Okay, let's hear it.
We now know that our brains actually thrive on the immediate, messy transfer of skills and emotions between diverse roles within these short time blocks. But the landscape of work is changing rapidly. As artificial intelligence steps in to handle the routine, predictable, mundane tasks of our jobs, what happens to this dynamic?
Oh, that is an interesting pivot. How does AI impact the roles we hold?
Well, think about it. If AI handles the simple stuff, will our remaining human tasks become so hyper-specialized and intensely demanding that this natural role cross-pollination disappears?
Oh, wow.
Will we lose the cognitive breathing room required to switch hats and gain that positive spillover because our jobs become too intense?
Yeah.
Or, conversely, will AI free up so much of our mental bandwidth and time that we can hold even more diverse roles simultaneously?
That is a brilliant question.
Perhaps the workers of the future won't just hold 6.28 roles. Maybe they'll hold 10 or 12, seamlessly integrating them with the help of technology, achieving levels of role enrichment we can't even begin to imagine yet.
That is a fascinating thing to mull over as you navigate your schedule today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Let go of the guilt, embrace the blur, and go out and confidently wear all 6.28 of your hats today. We'll see you next time.